Edgar Allan Poe and intellectual property rights.
My name is Edgar Allan Poe. I am a writer who was active in the United States in the early 19th century. I wrote The Murders in the Rue Morgue and The Fall of the House of Usher. Today, I would like to talk to you about intellectual property rights. Intellectual property rights are commonplace in modern times, but one reason for this is me. I have lived a life of poverty all my life. I was born in Boston to parents who were traveling actors. My father was a talented actor. He was very popular. My mother also supported my father as an actor. However, my father suddenly disappeared without a clear reason. My mother suffered from poverty after my father's disappearance, but she died of an illness, and I became an orphan. I had an older brother and a younger sister, but each of us was adopted by someone else and lived there. I was adopted by a merchant named Alan, who was a friend of my father. In the end, I did not get along well with my stepfather, Alan, and I was disowned at the age of 21. After that, I dropped out of school and continued to write poetry and novels to earn a living. However, poverty always followed me. One reason for this was that there was no concept of intellectual property rights. I was active as a writer in the early 19th century. Still, at that time, even if I published a popular book in a magazine, other publishers would immediately say that it was an interesting book and start copying it and selling it. This continued, and I hardly made any money as a writer. I'll give you an example. One of my representative works is a poem called The Raven. A big glass that speaks human language mysteriously visits the protagonist, who is heartbroken and distraught, and the conversation with the big glass makes the protagonist go completely insane. This poem was highly praised by the Russian literary master Dostoevsky. It was said to be a poem that will remain in world history. I became famous thanks to the poem, but this poem was quickly reprinted in other publications, and I didn't make any money. The total amount I received from the publication of The Raven was only $9. One of my most famous works, The Gold Bug, won a prize for a novel, and I received $100. Compared with it, you can see how little I earned. In the end, this situation continued, and I was so poor that the heating was turned off in my New York apartment during the cold winter, so I had no choice but to wrap myself in a blanket and hold my cat. I continued living like this until I died at the age of 41. Even after my death, it took a long time for the intellectual property rights to be established. There were frequent cases of other people plagiarizing characters without permission. For example, I wrote the detective novel The Murders in the Rue Morgue in 1841, but the British author Conan Doyle began writing a detective novel with a similar concept, The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, in 1891. This became a huge hit, mainly in the UK. Then, across the ocean in France, a writer named Maurice Leblanc began writing a series called Arsène Lupin. This series was also a hit in France, but Leblanc published a novel called Lupin vs. Sherlock Holmes. It was a novel in which the French Lupin defeats the British Sherlock Holmes. This angered the British. Even though France and Britain do not get along, I think Maurice Leblanc went too far by using Sherlock Holmes in his own work. Back then, things that are unthinkable today were commonplace. This matter has been written in detail by Kitan Club, who runs this account. If you are interested, please search for the hashtag Kitan Club or kitan-stories.com and visit the Kitan Club homepage. Thank you.
Kitan Club invites you into mysterious stories. Click the link in our profile or search kitan-stories.com. We look forward to your visit and will provide you with free samples. Please click like and subscribe.